This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
TNKR Media.
All right, you ready?
Ready.
Sammy, sit down.
I'm getting my tea.
All right, here we are back on the Salt Lake podcast. I'm here with my co-host Leslie Chesterman. Today we are together. I'm super happy to have my friend Sammy from Sammy's Deluxe in Rockland, Maine. I recently finally ate there, I figure a month ago with my daughters. We had a wonderful meal. I've wanted to go there for a long time, and it falls right into the category of restaurants that I seek and that I love. Last year around this time, I had a mind-bending meal at a restaurant called the Yellow Bittern in London, and Sammy's was like the cousin over the ocean. Sammy's Deluxe was very much like the Yellow Bittern. Hugh Cochran, the chef at the Yellow Bittern, is a well-studied fellow who's worked all over Europe in all kinds of amazing restaurants, and decided to, I don't know, go in a different direction for his personal cooking and his personal dining room, and doing it the way that he wants to do it. I feel that Sammy is very much the same. I wasn't aware of Sammy's deep training. I always thought Sammy was just like a happy-go-lucky fellow from Maine, from Rockland, Maine, who likes to forage, who enjoys the natural wonders of the coast of Maine and the forests of Maine. And then I discovered that you're quite a well-studied fellow. Tell us your beginnings in the restaurant business.
Oh, wait, and before you start, I just noticed that Sammy was on the list of the New York Times places to eat in 2025. So it's like, you're not just this isolated restaurant in Maine. You're a big deal. You're a big deal.
And an isolated restaurant in Maine.
So how did you start off?
Washing dishes, like many of the greats.
And in what city? Where did you start? What
in
city?
Durham, New Hampshire.
In Durham, New Hampshire. And what kind of restaurant was that?
It's a restaurant that has no meaning to me other than it was a job for a young high schooler. It was pretty nice. Probably it's a refurbished old inn. It was called the Three Chimneys Inn, and I was maybe 16 and wanted some gas money, and they were doing a huge hire because this was a new inn opening, and a lot of my friends and people I knew in high school were getting jobs being innkeepers or back servers or dishwashers. And my good friend had just gotten a job as a dishwasher, and he was liking it because, sometimes they'd make him a cheeseburger. And that sounded pretty groovy to me. So I did that. And I was probably a very bad dishwasher. But and I was a pig, I ate some of the food coming off the plates that came back from the dining room.
Ooh.
But I really liked food, and then I learned a little, some prep stuff, and I sort of liked the job a little bit, and I sort of hated the job. But there's something funny at this point in my life, because I talked to it seems like this story of other chefs that I know who started working as a dishwasher and like didn't love it, and it doesn't totally make sense why that would be a starting like a jumping off point for a long career in food. Like that would stick, but I think maybe and there's other reasons why maybe I cook, but maybe like just getting that little like it's a virus that like entered my body. Uh, like going to be in a restaurant and it stuck from that.
I think I have a very similar story as well, right?
Yeah.
From the beginning. It's very basically, yeah,
So
kind
it
of
wasn't about the food, it was about the magic of a restaurant.
Yeah, and I definitely was enamored of, that I was 16 and the other this is like, this isn't New York City, right? And so probably it's not necessarily like looking like a normal like what I think of as restaurant people now, but they're like the people who were cooking on the line, I definitely had some admiration for. And it's like, oh, they have chops and like this culture is interesting to me. So even if I didn't totally love it, they sort of were some sort of role model, and they had fun um, getting me to try food that I was like I hated. I remember I really actually hated seafood when I was a young kid, and they really wanted me to like try scallops. And I remember them like trying to keep forcing it on me. But like there's something touching about that of like they wanted to expose me to it. And yeah,
so
And you did, and it worked.
it started the process.
so what was the move to New York? What was the first big restaurant? How did that work out?
So I I did this stupid job in high school, and then in college I never I so at this point I'm not thinking like I want to cook for a living. Um, and I wasn't even cooking, though then like maybe a year or two later, um, junior, senior year in high school, I started cooking for fun. I remember the first thing I ever made was some chicken enchiladas out of a cookbook, out of like a some whatever like probably like Time Life Mexican food or something cookbook in my parents' house. And I knew at the time that I loved chicken enchiladas. Um, and I didn't have any concept of how like combining a set of how I could combine a set of ingredients to make that dish. And so I have this recipe and it's like, okay, I'm just gonna like follow these steps. And it sort of felt like alchemy. Like I did step one, A, B, C, D, and I couldn't see the process like the way that I could read a cookbook now and see like, oh, that makes sense to me. Like I just trusted the words on the page and followed them and then came up with chicken enchiladas and was just sort of amazed that like these ingredients that had no connection to me whatsoever. I didn't know how they would be combined, but I followed the instructions and all of a sudden like chicken enchiladas appeared. And like that, I remember that being a very magical experience. Um, and that sort of that moment there is what I think really gave me the bug of like, oh, I like cooking. And so I started doing it as a hobby. And then I started taking it more and more seriously. And like I watched a lot of food like Emeril and Mario Batali on the Food Network. And then I started like reading cookbooks. I got a library card and I went to the library and I read like the entire cookbook collection and just started like cooking through that. And then I always worked through college and I thought I was going to be I was a very good student in school and I got good grades and I thought I was supposed to lead this life where like you get good grades and then you go to a good college and then you go be a doctor or a lawyer and you get married and you have kids and like that's how that's what life is supposed to be. Um, and um, and so I was in college and I was studying math and economics. But then I worked through college. I was always had a job, and then I was really really liking cooking. And I was like, you know what? I should if I'm working, like, why don't I go work in a restaurant? Let's give that another whirl, and maybe I can get a cooking job, and I can get my money, and I can like take this more seriously. So then I worked at another restaurant in college, and I won't name it because it probably still exists. but it wasn't a very good restaurant, but it was sort of like fake fancy, right? It had like a pretty good rating in Zagat at the time. So I was like, okay, this is cool. Like I'll get a good education here, but it was really crappy, right? They like made stocks from powder, and like I think the chef's previous experience was like running an Applebee's, um, and um, and I wasn't very good either. I certainly was never trained as a line cook. I liked cooking a lot, but I wasn't like a good restaurant worker. And that lasted for maybe like 2.5 or 3 months. And it's great that I have this experience because it's the only time in my restaurant history where I had the classic like restaurant story of I don't know, are we allowed to swear on this show?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Like
yes. We
like
encourage it. Yeah.
fuck you, you're fired. Fuck you, I quit. Like throw pots and pans, and like it was a big restaurant explosion of like simultaneously like quitting and being fired, like with great passion and fury in the middle of dinner service. Um, and so that was that. And like, okay, I don't need to really work in a restaurant anymore. Then I graduated college and I got some like I moved to New York City, which is where, like I said, or maybe I didn't say, but obviously I must have grown up in Durham, New Hampshire, if that's where I was washing dishes. Um, and and that always felt like really small to me. And like there's a big, beautiful world out there and I want to see it. And I had an older cousin who lived in New York who I visited when I was 15. And like, this is, oh my God, this is magic. And every year, all my summers, I tried to get internships in New York. And I'd sort of just had a vision that like I need to wind up in New York. And so that's where I wound up. And I actually had this job at an economic consulting company. So that's what I did right out of college. And I liked it just fine. But my like food obsession um, was something that I was having a very hard time ignoring. And so I guess maybe 6 months out of college, like into New York, I decided and not knowing that this is a thing that already exists in restaurant worlds, but like, hey, I really want to take this cooking thing seriously. I want to see if like a very good restaurant might allow me to come in there on my day off, like every Saturday, and just like work for free and see what I can
Sorry,
learn.
but at that time, were you also going out to restaurants when you were in New York? Were you dining out?
Yes, but like not very wisely. Um,
Ah,
I mean, I guess I was for like a 22-year-old who wasn't really like paying that much attention to like the big food scene. Like I loved eating food, and so I like sought out things that were delicious. I wasn't like that aware of like the how to navigate the New York City food scene at the time. And so I wasn't like if I was having a meal that was expensive, like it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm saving up my money for, if I was there now, like, oh, I want to save up my money to eat at like La Veau d'Or or something like that. Like it wasn't that intentional and smart. But I certainly like and also I didn't have that much money, right? But like I was living in the East Village, so it's like I'm going to explore and learn like um, where can I find like what are the gems of Chinatown? And I'll learn that inside and out because that's like in my budget and that's like really good eating. And like there was like a cab stand down the street from me that was they sold vegetarian like Indian Punjabi food, and it was like $2.50 for the most delicious plate of food I've ever eaten in my life. And so like that's one of the just cool things about New York of just like there's such good food on all levels. Um, but yeah, so and I also probably ate like a lot of dumb brunches with unlimited mimosas because I was 22 and like there were girls there. Um, but so I knocked on the first I guess at the time that like one thing that I became aware of was this story of this chef Wiley Dufresne, and he was this like wonder child who had previously worked I think either on the opening team of or like soon thereafter the original like Columbus Circle Jean Georges restaurant, and
Yeah.
he had done well there. And then he got sent to Las Vegas to like run a steakhouse. But then his dad uh, was a former like restaurant owner, restaurant manager from Rhode Island, and he was like dating um, a woman. I might be getting the story slightly wrong, but I believe he was dating a woman who lived on the Lower East Side, which was sort of like not a nice neighborhood.
Yeah, I
And
remember when he opened WD-50, that was in basically what you call Hell's Kitchen, no?
no, it was the Lower East Side. It was on Clinton
Oh, okay.
Street. But so this
Oh, Clinton Street. Yeah.
rewind a restaurant. So he's like dating this woman, and who's living in this building with a bunch of her friends that they bought. I think it had no roof when they bought it. It was just four walls, and they bought it and restored it. And there were a bunch of artists, and the neighborhood was like sort of gentrifying, but not that quickly. And they really liked food, and they saw their friends really liking food, but they would have to travel like a minimum of 2 miles to go to a good restaurant. And they're like, we need to open up a good restaurant here. And so they got a space
Sorry, this is
on.
like early 90s? Early
This
90s?
is so no, it's late 90s, late 90s.
Oh, late 90s. Okay.
Yep. I don't know the
So this
exact
is yeah, this is Wiley's restaurant before
71
WD-50.
Clinton fresh
Right,
food.
I remember
That's
very
right.
well. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yep. So they got this space, and Wiley's dad is dating this woman. And so he's like, hey, my son's a chef. He's running this steakhouse in Las Vegas. Like, he's learning to play cards, but I don't think it's like what he really wants to do. Like, I think he's the guy for the job. And so they got him to fly back, and he was the chef at 71 Clinton Fresh Food, and it was like an overnight sensation.
Mm.
And I wasn't there for the opening of it, but I whatever for whatever reason it was like down the block from me, and I started like I got obsessed with the restaurant, and I started like reading, I read everything about Wiley Dufresne and his story. And so that was the first. I was like, I am going to knock on that door first. And when I got to New York, he wasn't even there anymore. He had left the restaurant, and I guess he had plans, though this time unbeknownst to me, to open up his like bigger, because Samuel Clinton is tiny, to open up his bigger WD-50. And it's, to be honest, like my dumb luck that I knocked on the door when he wasn't there. Because I knocked on the door, and it was this guy who was his former sous chef, Matt Regwin, who I talked to, and I gave him my resume, and he's like, "Oh, you studied math? I studied math, and you want to do this? Like, that's great." And like at the time, I remember he was in the place was so small, like half of the prep happened in the dining room, um, because there was no room in the kitchen to prep everything. So he was like out in the dining room, and he was pretty short. He was like standing on a dish rack so he could reach the top of the bar while he was like cooling.
That's short.
Yeah, he was cooling a creme anglaise in a hotel pan over ice. And it was just like this, again, this is like a caliber of food, right? I had never seen food preparation like this. So whatever mixture, whatever concoction he's mixing in there in this like very professional way is like, this is magic. Like, I want to be in this world. And he said like, okay, sure, show up. And so I came on Saturday, and like it was perfect that it was a restaurant like without egos, and like my like eagerness was meaningful to him, and he took me under his wing and was so kind to me. And like after that, I did the same sort of thing at other restaurants, but I can say definitely, I'm not sure if like the first restaurant I had knocked on the door of was WD-50, where actually I wound up doing something similar at later, and that wasn't easy. I worked with a bunch of people who had egos, and they were very skilled, but it was a different atmosphere, and I'm not sure I would still be here today if that was how I really started.
I have a question about math and chefs. Do you think your mathematician's brain had anything to do with you wanting to be a chef, or how did like there's some parallels there, no?
Um, Maybe. I think like so it sent me, to be honest, it sent me down, I think, a little bit of a weird path. In that like so I was doing this every Saturday at 71 Clinton Fresh Food while still working in the economic consulting place. And and then I guess like a year in, Um, and I'm not ready to make the plunge and say like I want to do this for a career. Um, Although it felt tempting a few times. And I remember they had to hire a new cook, and I felt a little bit upset that they didn't even ask me if I wanted the job. Like I wanted at least the ability to tell them, no, I don't want the job. Or like maybe consider it. Um, but then when WD-50 opened up, it was like, okay, I have to go do that over there. And so I did that, and this was so at the time WD-50 was an early pioneer of I'm gonna throw up a little bit in my mouth as I say this of molecular gastronomy.
I
And
For
remember
sure,
clearly.
for
It was,
sure.
yeah, while he was well known for being one of the first kind of, in North America at least, to
yep,
go down that pathway.
Big time.
right.
And what was your relationship? What was your first meeting with him like?
Um, it was just like, I might as well have been trying to meet I don't know, fill in the blank, like John Lennon, right? He was like a rock star to me, like of the highest caliber. And so it was with like respect, it was with fear, it was with it it
Aw.
it was with awe. And he was like he was not unkind, but he also didn't have that much time for me. It wasn't a small restaurant. It definitely was like, you know, I wound up I was at the time I when I did this for a while, there were time I was one of like a handful of stages. I was a weirdo in that like I was doing this economic consulting thing. They didn't really quite know what to make of me, which is
Right.
fair in some ways, I guess.
Well, I think in kitchens, when people come in from the outside, they don't think you're going to stay long. They don't necessarily take you seriously,
Yep.
especially if you're a little bit older, because kitchens really want people when they're young so they can grab them when they're young.
Yep.
But, if you had walked into a kitchen in France, they probably wouldn't have let you in,
Right.
but obviously you're dedicated.
Well, I had the fact that I was coming from 71 Clinton Fresh Food. So, for example, I had already met them. Like when the chef at 71 Clinton Fresh, they were all friends, right? So, and these restaurants were across the street from each other. And so
Mm,
like I would have met them coming into 71 Clinton Fresh Food. When Matt Regwin, I actually wound up one of the impetuses for leaving 71 Clinton Fresh Food was that this like the former sous chef, Matt Regwin, he left the restaurant and my relationship with him was so strong. So at his like going away party that I went to and like felt tickled to go to, um, all the W50 people were there and like I talked to them then and I think Matt like greased the wheel for me like going over there. He gave gifts to people at his going away party and he got me a gift. This is Matt Regwin, which is like one of the most beautiful, most meaningful books I own. It's a little paperback book and it's called How to Fake Your Way Through Gourmet Cooking and it's been my North Star ever since.
no,
I need to get that. That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah,
it's a good
yeah.
one. But so like being at WD-50 at this time um, of like the molecular gastronomy thing, which is a phrase that makes me want to gag in my mouth, but there's still
Right.
some cool things that come out of that. Like watching Wiley like sort of discover this egg that is now like so played out, but a slow poached egg, and like tasting that for the first time, man, that was mind blowing.
What is that, like the 10-hour? What is the name of that egg? It's
I
like
mean,
it's got
there's
a
so many
name, like,
versions of it. His
yeah,
was 1 hour at
1 hour. Okay.
yeah, just at I believe it was 1 hour.
Was
Maybe
that
I'm
in an
saying
immersion
yeah, it was
circulator?
an
Is that how
immersion
we do it? Yeah.
circulator exactly, and even that process there was what the hell's his name? Dave Arnold was a friend of Wiley Dufresne, who was like this like mad scientist guy, and he was like buying immersion circulators, which is at the time were like very expensive lab equipment. Nothing found in a kitchen. He was buying them off of eBay and like, hey, Wiley, I think you could use this for cooking. And like they were always tinkering in the corner. And man, that was like really fun to watch. It was cool to be
Yeah.
around. And so that
Yeah.
was infectious. And this like sort of, I didn't really know very much about cooking, um, but this like seeming to take like a scientific approach and that there's numbers involved, like that resonated with me. And so that was like, oh, this is a path that I want to explore. And so then from WD-50, I realized like, okay, they're doing pretty cool work, but really the godfather is this restaurant in England, the Fat Duck. And he's the one who's like really ground zero, and I got to go there. And so I wrote them a letter, and Wiley, I guess I had been good enough at WD-50 that Wiley helped me out. And that's where I took the plunge, because all through this time I was working at the economic consulting place, and I was like, I got this internship. I didn't get a working visa or anything. It's like I'm going to go over for 6 months as a like that's the longest tourist visa you can have. Like according to the government of England, I'm a tourist. And it's so this is a big step. I'm quitting my job. I'm moving out of my apartment and I'm going to England to work for free. I'm planning on doing a stage, but then my timing was I just got lucky when I got over there. Like someone in the pastry department, I guess, had just quit. And so the chef, I just got off the plane, and in fact, I had trouble at the airport. Like the British government didn't believe I was going to be a tourist, and they brought me to like some interrogation room, and like I thought that I was going to get turned around, but they finally let me in. Um, and so I showed up, and he was like, I know you don't have pastry background, but we have like a need actually for you to do pastry. So would that be okay? And like what an idiot I am. I said like no, actually I would prefer to do the kitchen. Like the pastry's not good for me. And and he's like,
Well, you're
well,
honest. At least you're honest, you know.
stupidly, well, also like ignorant because like why not?
Hmm.
It's just like that's what came out of my dumb little mouth. And he's like, well, you'll be doing pastry. And I said, okay. And in retrospect, like how lucky I am. Like I was over there, I didn't know what I was going to be an unpaid like intern. I was like and for 6 months, I would have been like peeling turnips for 6 months. And instead, I got my first like line cooking position. Um, and it was real trial by fire. But here I am, like part of this dream team. The restaurant had just gotten 3 Michelin stars right before I came. I guess they had gotten word that I was arriving, so they gave 3 Michelin stars in anticipation of my arrival. Um, so that was sort of crazy. Like I wasn't there for that transition, but it had just happened. And then like halfway through my 6 months, um, that like it was fairly new. It might have been like the second or third time that the very silly San Pellegrino 50 best um, list came out. Although I'll take that back because now I see it's like giving accolades to like my dear friends
Hmm.
Beba and stuff. So the list has redeemed themselves. But they said that the Fat Duck was the best restaurant in the world,
Right.
and like I was there at that time, and then we like went to like some dumb pub at 2 in the morning after our dinner service. Like, we got there at 7 in the morning and we got out at 2 in the morning. And there we are at a party with Albert Adria. And I was like, what the hell is happening with me? Like, how have I landed in this place? And like,
Another molecular pastry chef like you.
exactly. So in terms of the question of like that, I guess like the economics and math background like brought me on this like following this like sort of science-backed cooking that still I pay attention to a little bit, like, the temperature that things wind up at is important. Um, but I've not really. I like making meatballs better.
Yeah, I would say you've rejected completely. Um,
Molecular
yeah, you're the
meatballs.
opposite of Michelin and the opposite of
Things
molecular.
are
Yeah.
changing. Things are changing. I want to know I'm sitting here racking my brain thinking of the name of the chef of Fat Duck.
Eston
Heston
Blumenthal.
Preston
Blumenthal.
Blumenthal. I keep thinking Fergus Henderson. All these English names. Of course, a polar opposites, those two chefs, really. But
Yeah.
what was it like working for him? Because he's quite a character. And was he at all? Did he and Willie Dufresne have any friendship? Was there anything there? Mutual
Yeah, no,
respect?
they were like um I wasn't on conference calls with them at the time, believe it or not. Um, but they definitely had like it seemed like they had a strong friendship and correspondence, and they were exchanging ideas, and that felt like really fun to be a part of. And then just by dumb luck, right? I was there at the right place at the right time. Like there were no other. I was a weirdo for saying like, "Hey, I'm happy. I want to work here for free." Like this thing didn't exist, and then it wound up that I didn't even work there for free. Um, and like I had like a real position. Like they, 10 years later, like nobody would get hired there. You could be, I mean, like, or at Noma or something, it's like there's a team of 200 people, like seven of which are paid. It's not like a
Right.
stage shows up and they're working a station. But so I was there and Heston was there every day. And like, I'm a dumb American with no experience. And like, he's still talking to me like a human being. And like, he's present in the kitchen. And so he was like a nice guy and hands-on and like not and very approachable and like fun and funny. And he took care of us. Like every 2 weeks, a massage therapist came into the restaurant, and the entire staff, front of the house and back of the house, had a 15-minute slot to get a massage. And we were like working our asses off. Like the prep was grueling. But it doesn't matter. Like when you had your 15-minute slot, like you went in there. And if you had stuff that you had to do, like our teammates would like take whatever was out like in the oven waiting for the timer to go off. Like, we all made sure that we got that slot, and like that resonates. Like that's not a normal restaurant thing.
I would think that being familiar with him mostly through his show that he did. He did this crazy show where he'd make a version of macaroni and cheese or a Black Forest cake or
Yeah, just the best of whatever. I don't
the
remember the name of
best
it.
of whatever a
Yeah.
thing was called. I would think you'd almost be in an advantage going into his kitchen with very little experience.
Well,
You
the
see,
he
because
has
he did things really his own way,
but
right?
he also has such a weird story, right? Um he was like a photocopy salesman or something funny like that. Um, and he was obsessed with food and had never, I think he had really never worked in any restaurants. And he was just, I'm going to throw up in my mouth again, but he was a foodie. That's even the worst word than molecular gastronomy. So he was a foodie, and he like always, and I think that, so he had, I guess maybe he was a little well off, his family, and they had like eaten at Michelin starred restaurants when he was a kid. And like that stuck with him and is like, man, I'm enamored of fancy food. And so he wanted to make a little restaurant, but he had absolutely no experience whatsoever.
Yeah, and
And
from what I had no experience either, So you're with the big, you're with the big guns
well,
there.
I don't think that's totally true of Ferran Adria.
Oh, he says he's an autodidact.
Autodidact.
What's that?
He says that he has no training.
Maybe no training, but he worked in lots and lots of restaurants
Oh, right.
before El
Maybe he's saying he
Bulli.
didn't go to cooking school
Right,
then,
right, right, right.
like
I
that.
think maybe he was in the army I don't totally know his story that well. But so
Right.
Heston, like, if he had any kitchen experience, it was like super, super limited. And he bought this little like pub.
Pub? Was it a pub?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it was sorry, it wasn't a pub. It was a
An inn.
very, very old building. It was like from the 15th century. Um, and the infrastructure was horrendous. And the power of his gas stove was so poor that like he couldn't boil more than 8 green beans at a time and they would stay
Okay.
green. And so that sent him down this path of like getting in touch with, I forget the name of a new like food scientist who I think was at like Cambridge or Oxford, and I'm totally blanking on it. But
Right. I'm as well blanking on. I'm familiar with the
that
little
was an
company.
important relationship, which got him like sort of asking the question of what is it that keeps vegetables green when you blanch them? And like, is it the power of the gas stove? Is it like, and so like just asking interesting questions. And that's what opened the door for him to basically forge this relationship with people outside the food world, outside the restaurant food world, but in like the food science world, and sort of harness this knowledge that at the time was being harnessed by like Hershey's and like Doritos and people making like
Mhm.
great versions of processed food, but wasn't really in real food.
What's with the fat duck now? It's funny because when you talk about it being number one on the world's 50 best list, I'm like, I remember being in England and impossible to get a reservation. I had to go through family, friends, even that didn't work. But like, where are they now? I'm really trying to think about this.
You know what? I have absolutely no idea.
No,
You,
I think
David,
yeah,
what
they
do you
still
think?
retain three Michelin stars, but nobody's ever on those lists for
Forever. Yeah. Good.
forever. But
All the better.
and I think that there's some kind of beauty to retaining three Michelin stars and basically disappearing a little bit in the landscape, and this basically being a three Michelin star restaurant with no added media hype. There's a whole bunch of three Michelin stars all over France that we never really hear much about,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
they're just
Or
great
Germany. Yeah.
places. Yeah, Germany as well. Were great places full of great tradespeople practicing, their luxury cooking day in and day out. And there's something said to, that those are beautiful restaurants, in my opinion. Like, I find like when any of the top restaurants become, San Pellegrino number one and like media destinations and foodie destinations,
Yeah.
they become less interesting to me. I'm more
Yeah.
interested about the weird one in the Black Forest that
Right.
Right, right,
specializes
right,
in
right.
boar.
But you know what also happened to Heston Blumenthal is he became extremely famous, and then his personal life started getting in the tabloids. And so actually the last few times I heard about Heston Blumenthal wasn't about his cooking, it was about his personal life. So that's what happens to chefs is that they turn in, look at Gordon Ramsay. What's the last time you saw one of his dishes? No, but we all know what he did last week. It's so I think he went into that superstar category and we kind of stopped paying attention to what he was doing and maybe who he was sleeping with.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm feeling the same thing right now.
Yeah, I think that ever since that New York Times thing, I've heard things. I've heard things.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Great. So then, and so how long did you end up staying there?
I mean, I was there for 6 months,
But
just
you were
on the
paid? You ended up
tourist.
getting paid?
Not. I got a
Under
little
the
bit of
table?
money. I didn't get. I know the official answer is no.
Okay, right, right.
And actually, so I wound up cutting it a little. I wound up. It was maybe 5.5 months or 5.25 months, and then I did 10 days at St. John. Uh,
Oh,
Oh, beautiful.
so I
the
wanted
opposite, right? Kind of cooking?
exactly.
Yeah.
And then I took a little trip to Scotland for fun.
Great.
So I wasn't a complete psychopath.
So
Just to,
back to New York after that?
then back to well, I didn't not yeah yes I did wind up in New York. I didn't know where I would wind up. In fact, my first stop was California, and I staged at Chez Panisse, and but then I didn't. But then
For how
I
long?
wound up
How were you? Yeah,
just
how
no.
long?
I interviewed for a job, and
Right,
I decided that wasn't the spot for me.
right.
And then
Any
and
reason why? Would you like to share why it
Oh,
wasn't?
I guess I mean honestly, it was more about like I have family in the Bay Area of San Francisco, and I knew San Francisco, and like I never for some reason it like never it's a lovely place, but it never like called to me. So it was more I think
Oh.
about the place than it. I mean my time there there's a lot that I love about that restaurant, and they do things in really interesting ways that like I've certainly stolen a lot from, and
And the
it's been
produce, would you say if you compare the produce you got in England to the produce that you saw in San Francisco, was it on a par, kind of
so
beautiful
this
produce
is
or
I mean the weird there was good ingredients at the Fat Duck, but the thing that's weird to me is like that wasn't really the point, like the techniques were the point, and
interesting?
that is to me as at this point in time I would say about as backwards as you can get. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's just not what like the if and I want to put 99% of my attention on getting the best products I can get. Um, and that I didn't find that to be the case at the Fat Duck, even though there were some lovely products.
Right. But at Chez Panisse, that's their whole mantra.
Exactly. And I know there was like this funny rift that like I think like maybe David Chang said, California cooking is putting a fig on a plate and there's nothing
Yeah.
to it. And there's like obviously it was sort of a joke, but there's like some truth in that. Like you can definitely take it a little far, maybe, but also like when peaches are perfect, like what kind of idiot would do anything other than hand you a peach? Um,
Yeah, I've had fruit in California, at I believe it's Santa Barbara Farmers Market there. 8 of the best fruits I've had in my life were all in like a 2-week period
yeah, that makes
at
sense.
that market. Best plum, best red fleshed apple, best lemon, best grapefruit. I was just like, what it's kind of, I was just like, it's really easy to cook here probably because I would take this white grapefruit, which is basically an extinct fruit now,
Uh-huh.
and
That's true.
put segments of this fruit on a plate and, try really hard not to put the really great California olive oil on it. So there's some of the product there is just ridiculous. Like there's
You
even
can't, all you can do is mess it up. You can't improve it.
yeah, you can't. So
And
yeah.
You don't want to make
or
a sorbet with it. You don't want to
here's
know.
here's a nut here. Let me give you an even clearer example. Back at 71 Clinton Fresh Food, I had asked. There was a really good cookbook collection, and I remember going through this beautiful cookbook, and it was by Joel Robuchon, and it had 12 chapters, and each chapter was a different month, and each month was highlighting one ingredient that was special for that month. So I don't remember if it was like December or January or something was the oyster chapter, and there was this like amazing 3-page essay about how oysters are the perfect ingredient and they can't be improved. And then after that, there was, 5 pages of oyster recipes where he's manipulating oysters. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. You just like convinced me that oysters are the perfect ingredient. They can't be improved, but here you are improving them. And like, I could never wrap my head around that. And yeah, that's it.
Well, the French can't resist, right? The
But
French
you
are
have to.
always,
You have to. If you know
you have
better,
to resist.
if you it, like I don't think you're being the best chef you can be if you're saying this is the best way to eat it, but I'm going to give you something less than the best.
Well, ego and skill are like a problem in youth. It took even for myself to get quite older and have many years under my belt in the restaurant industry to basically, shake my head and throw cold water in my face and slap myself in the back of the head to go, no, no, stop, stop now. We have to find product, the
Yeah.
best product, like period. Like bend over backwards, read everything you can about oysters, get on the phone, call everyone, my Canadian perspective, and let's get to the bottom of oysters right now. And then, bring them to the restaurant and then, say, you know what, let's like lose the cocktail sauce. Let's lose the lemons because where oysters come from, lemons don't come from. So that doesn't make sense to me. And let's make a hot sauce, but made from, maybe apples and peppers that, may grow in Prince Edward Island or Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
And, just dig a little bit deeper about that. Like, I never understood so much, lemon on trout. There's where trout comes from, there's no lemons. And, you know, be more obsessed about it. A chef told me a long time ago, he says, "Oh, David, cooking's easy. When it comes to fish, well, where that fish is caught, cook the fish with the things that might be growing near the dock." And I was like, "Well, that's interesting." So you look, take cod, for example, and you go cod, potatoes, corn, onions, and you're good. You're good for a career. Those three combinations, potato cream, cream corn, a potato galette with corn, crispy corn, just go on and on and on. And cod will always win with potatoes and corn and onions. And then it's, the same thing applies to, a lamb. David, what does a lamb eat? Well, I figure a lamb likes carrots, turnips, cabbage. I figure it likes probably green beans. So it's like, there you go. Your career's done. All you have ever to do when, lamb with mango might work in the Caribbean, or
Yeah.
South America, so those things work. But I don't know, staying true to and understanding, where the product comes from and what should be served with it. Like here on the farm, there's chickens, and right now the chickens are eating pears and apples that are falling down on the ground, and
That
they,
sounds good.
yeah. So it's like, chicken with apples and pears would be a fine dish tonight. It creates itself, right?
I think there's always that contrast though between the ingredient that can be served raw and on its own, and then the chicken that the chef has to transform. There is the technique also that the chef is going to, and sometimes those plums aren't so great. So maybe you do want to put them in a tart and it is nice to have the pristine idea of the fig on the plate. But really, a lot of the work of the chef is to take something that's maybe not as great as that perfect peach or something and make it great. Paul Bocuse always said a great chef could take a mediocre ingredient and make it great. And that's always been a big debate in cooking, whether or not a chef could really make something mediocre great. It's a lot like winemaking, right? There are parallels to be made there. It's fascinating.
But I would just watch chefs like everybody cooking. Let's say you made the choice to serve New Zealand rack of lamb in your restaurant. I would say let's not serve rack of lamb from New Zealand, and let's just make a pork sausage because these pigs are awesome and they're from down the road, and there's tons of sage in my garden, right? So yeah, sometimes you got to just think with your head as opposed to, but it would look so nice because I have this like pistachio crust idea for the lamb. Sure, and it probably tastes delicious and looks great, but academically it's zero, right? To buy a New Zealand rack of lamb and put a pistachio crust on it in a Montreal restaurant.
Right.
It might make the customers happy. It might make the accountant happy. It might, make the other chefs on the line happy. But I look at that as being not valid.
Oh, and people are going to order it. For sure, people are going to order it,
But
But they order a molten chocolate cake too, So.
I get what you're saying, and it's like definitely not nothing that like okay, you get that like you spend your time and you get a perfect chicken, but still you can like overcook it and undercook it, and like technique is important, and like it's not nothing. Like 7 different cooks could still like produce 7 very different chickens, ranging from like pretty bad to incredible. But I think you're lost if you don't start with the best chicken you can
Great
have.
Chicken.
Or
Exactly.
I mean, but this being said, like there's great cooks in the world who can make magic out of like meager ingredients,
Yeah.
whatever that means.
Not crap ingredients. Like, lesser maybe, but yeah. Yeah. So
No, but I mean, maybe
yeah.
even you have like, even if you're an honest person and you have some like, you know, carrots that aren't like past their prime in your fridge, like, you do something lovely with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So so after you left the Bay Area, did you go back to New York?
I did. So I was like a complete snob, and I wanted to only work at the best because, like, remember, I'm like a good student and a straight A
Yeah,
student.
and you'd only worked at the best.
You're huge now, but
Yeah, 3
I'm
Michelin
like,
stars, world's 50
I'm
best. You're a
elitist.
big deal. You're a big deal.
And like and so I sent letters to like basically the quote unquote best restaurants in New York, and really it was like Per Se that had just opened and Jean George, and I trailed at both of them, and I hated Per Se with a passion. Uh, I think I still do.
the
Um,
same. I hate it.
yeah, and Jean George. Uh, I was looked pretty tough, but also looked pretty interesting, and gave me a job, and I gave that a whirl, and that wound up sticking for like 2 years. So
Nice.
that happened.
That was a
Did you work
beautiful
with-
kitchen
Did
too,
you
eh?
work with him
Yeah,
directly?
it was not only was it a beautiful kitchen, but again, it was this funny. So basically, like that was right on the corner of Columbus Circle,
Yeah.
and in like a pretty weird building, to be honest, given how things have gone. But we won't talk about that. But when you so that the kitchen had these huge windows that the kitchen had these huge windows that people walking by, there was like a little sort of brick terrace that you could walk up and like look into the kitchen, like looking at the zoo animals, um, and watch them work. And I had my college girlfriend. She was a year older than me, and she moved to New York. So what a year before I graduated, and she was going to law school, and her dorm was like right down the street from Columbus Circle. So I would go visit her, or then and I would walk past there, and I was one of the gawkers who would go up to the terrace and like look in at this like magical dance, this ballet dance of the cooks in their tall white hats, in this the most beautiful kitchen I'd ever seen, with the beautiful like copper pots all lined up, and like stare at them with like drool coming out of my mouth. And then I couldn't believe it when I was on the other side of that window and like watching the idiots watch me work. And like
They were drilling
I
it.
was one of those people. And when I left the restaurant, um, uh, and I was very emotional. And I got, I think, like a bottle of, I don't know what, Fernet or something to share with the team and have like a little toast. And that was basically my toast of like, hey, guys, like we work really hard, and like we're sort of like, we have blinders on, but like, we're in front of this window, and there's people looking in all the time. And I don't think you were ever on the other side of that window, but let me tell you that I was once on the other side of that window. And I was just enamored of the magic. And I don't want you to lose track of that. Like you're in a really special place and you're doing something incredible. And I'm very sad to be leaving this place. It's been very meaningful to me. And uh, it's it seems like something that's not possible to, if you haven't been there and you're just looking in. It's like how this is a world that you can't even imagine what it is to an outsider. It's just so unbelievable before
So why
you.
did you leave? Why,
Why did I leave?
what?
I left because I got comfortable. I guess I reached a point where the next logical step would be to like maybe try to become a sous chef or something.
Right.
And I didn't really want to do that. Um, and I think also I'm really antsy. And and I
Did you feel you weren't learning anymore?
no, I certainly would have learned, but I'm just antsy, and I didn't want to stay and become a sous chef. I didn't want to have like a corporate job there, which seemed like the path. And I was like, I just want a break. Like I've been doing this, like working in kitchens for a long time, but also I have, I feel like I want to like sit back and process what I've learned, and
Hmm.
like on my own time and my own terms. And maybe I want to like cook some food for myself that I'm not being told what to do, which is really
Hmm.
funny. Like looking back at the food I cooked during that time, basically would have been like sort of Jean-Georges sous chef food. I'm completely just mimicking everything that I
Right.
saw there and thinking that I'm making stuff up.
You weren't allowed to have any input on the menu. It was
Oh,
really
no, no,
all
no,
him.
no, 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 not at all. Why
Oh,
would,
right.
no.
Yeah, okay.
The
Right.
only input we had would be like if we're shown some technique and do it like 3,000 times, and then they trust us and we're like, hey, chef, maybe if we do this different, like this might come out better, like this might be more efficient. I remember, for example, I had one dish that had these carrot tuiles, and I had to grate like a case of carrots every night with a microplane.
Oh,
And
God.
I found, and I like grated my knuckles and stuff, and then I found that RoboCoop
A
made like a
blade for.
microplane blade, and it was like, hey, wouldn't it be like way more efficient to buy this blade? And I got a lot of pushback at first. I think because like the blade was $70 and basically my labor was free. So
Right.
that didn't
So you
make
bought it
sense
yourself?
to do. I probably would have, but
Yeah.
eventually they bought it. And so that's the sort of input that you could have of like maybe there's like a better way to we can produce this exact same thing.
Oh, right. But nobody's asking for your opinion
Oh,
on a
not no,
dish.
not at all.
Uh, right. So how old were you when you left at
I
that point?
was 20, I was just turned 27.
Okay. Okay. And then what? And then where?
So then I wandered through the desert. Uh,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I I It's pretty weird, actually. So actually, when I wound up back in New York, and I had thought I had quit that economic consulting job, Jean George wasn't enough money to live on.
Can you tell us how much you were making? Like just
So
it's good for people to know.
I believe I was making $10 an hour,
Yeah,
and
right.
somehow miraculously, I was always having 39 hours a week, even though I
Yeah,
think it was
right, right.
probably double that. Um,
Mm.
but it wasn't even something I like that like was on my radar that this is problematic. It was like this is just normal. And it's
You were
like
so into it
I
that you
could
didn't.
be paying for cooking school, but instead I'm being nominally paid to learn how to cook was my attitude.
Yeah.
And like, why would I make a fuss? They're just gonna like they would fire me and hire somebody else. And it's like didn't even occur to me that this might be problematic. Um, so my rent was like ungodly cheap. I think it was like 550 or $600 a month. And it doesn't get much cheaper, but that still wasn't affordable. And so it was like, I'm gonna need to have another job. I thought I would like do some catering or something. But I got back in touch with the economic consulting place that I had like left on good terms with. I was like, would you consider like a part-time thing? And they said yes. So all through those 2 years, I would do the economic consulting in the morning, and maybe one of my days off, and then Jean George at night. So I all I did pretty much was like work and sleep for those 2 years. Um, and then when I quit Jean George, basically I still had the economic consulting job. So I was working there like 20 hours a week and like having some free time for the first time in my life. And so first I just soaked that up. And like I played a lot of soccer and and like I went out and like tried to go on a date or something, even though like I was completely uncivilized at this point. And I mean, still am, but like then I hadn't spoken to anyone other than cooks for the last like
Mm.
4 years, and so that didn't go so well.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not a high level of conversation. I
no,
mean,
very, very low level.
depends. Rare. Yeah.
Um, and but then basically it was I became I sort of structured my life. It sounds weird, maybe, I don't know. I sort of structured my life in like I want to make um a residency for myself.
Explain that.
So I'm working 20 hours a week at the economic consulting place, and I was used to working 90 hours a week. So I have all this free time, and I was living in this weird, like, tiny studio apartment in the very fun East Village, and with a tiny kitchen. But it's like, I see a path forward where I can, like, sort of outfit this kitchen in a weird way, and I can just, like, very deliberately cook. And I have all these ideas kicking around in my head, and I want to explore them. And I'm going to keep journals. I'm going to keep a journal of every single thing that I eat and every single thing that I cook, and I'm going to reflect on them, and I'm going to improve. And I did that. I kept it incredible. I'm there. I'm so like, if I had that work, I don't have that work ethic anymore, but like how thoughtful I was with food. And it's also funny, again, like I said, looking back on these things that I thought were like original ideas kicking around in my head, and there's so much parroting Jean George. But then over time, like that started falling away and like finding my own voice. And so basically, I would just like obsessively cook, um, more or less for myself or for have friends over to get feedback. And then when I came up with like 4 or 5 or 6 things that I thought were like very good, it's like, okay, I'm gonna workshop this. And so I had it was a studio, but it was sort of a one bedroom, but I there was a loft above the bathroom. So I slept in the loft. I made this wanky um ladder. Like the floors were uneven, so I had a really good carpenter friend who helped me build this ladder with uneven legs to match the uneven floor. And I slept in the loft above the bathroom. And then what would have been the bedroom, I had a couch in but didn't really use it, but then outfitted this like tabletop that fit over my couch so that 8 people with could cram into this room and be able to sit on this table. And once every 5 weeks or so, I would have a dinner for 8 people to make this food that I was like workshop this food that I was making. And so that was sort of, it wasn't a sustainable, it didn't pay my income. I still had my job. Um, but
These are strangers or friends of friends
it
or
started as friends, and then it was friends of friends, and then it was strangers. It was like a list that grew. Um, and so that was, I guess, Supper Club version 1, but it wasn't really a supper club. I think it was more of like
lab? Like,
I guess I sort of think of it as like a workshop slash, it seems closest to like a residency, like an artist residency that I gave myself.
Was this the end of the restaurant business? Working in restaurants?
It was phase 1 of the end of the restaurant business. And then I got tired of that. And then I also got confused. And like I don't know, it was like I sort of got I hit a bit of a wall. I got a little depressed or a lot of depressed. And like this thing like isn't really sustainable. Also, there was there was an economic whatever the 2008 like recession
mm,
thing, and I actually
yeah.
got laid off from the consulting thing, which was a blessing. It was sort of a golden handcuffs. I wasn't really liking it at the time, but it was allowing me to live this lifestyle. But so it forced me to make some decision of like, here I am cooking, but it's not really a way that's like paying the bills. Like the idea of going back to work, like how I had been doing it at Jean Georges, I'm not really liking. So I don't really know where to go from here. I'm a little bit lost.
Mm, mm.
And and so I tried going back to restaurants, and I tried to go to different kinds of restaurants than Jean George. I wound up, but I wasn't being creative enough looking back on it. I wound up, like I applied for and staged at, spent a day interviewing at a handful of restaurants. And the one that stuck with me the most that I decided I really want to work at was Gramercy Tavern.
Mm.
And it seemed to me like a polar opposite of Jean Georges, where like this place is very not technique driven and it's ingredient driven. So much so, one of the things that like really stuck out to me was there was an arugula salad and there were a bunch of like beetle holes in the arugula leaf that definitely would have gotten tossed at Jean George. And Mike Anthony, really smart, really sweet guy, explained to the cook, like, no, we're definitely not tossing those. We're serving them. And in fact, these are more delicious than arugula leaves without the holes in them because as a defense, like the plant is giving like the basically the plant defense oftentimes those are also like beneficial human nutrients and make the arugula more robust and more delicious.
Mm.
And this isn't a flaw, it's part of nature, it's organic arugula, and if the beetle thinks it's delicious, so do we. And like
I
this,
agree 100%. And also, Michael Anthony's a wonderful dude.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
I love that restaurant so much. It was very eye-opening even for me in my
Mm.
youth. When I used to
Mm.
go eat there,
Yep.
I always thought that restaurant was very, very special. I had a dream. Maybe you can enlighten me. What's that weird little two-man stove in the tavern
The
part?
tavern, the grill, yeah.
But what is that? What is that machine? Was that
It,
like?
I mean, it's like a little wood burning grill.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I used to eat in the tavern part or whatever, and
That's the best place to eat.
yeah, and I was just always like, there'd always be like two disheveled kind of cooks, uh, you know, at at that station uh, with dirtier aprons than they should, maybe,
Yep.
because of the wood and the charcoal and all that. And I was like, oh God, that's my station there. I'd like to
Right.
think
Well,
that's why I aspire to.
the funny thing also is like it's basically like two restaurants under one roof, which is the same with
Yeah.
John George. There's the Nougatine and John George, and this one there's the tavern, and then there's like the main dining room, right? And so in the hierarchy of the restaurant, most people would start in the tavern that's more casual, and then like when you prove yourself, like you work up to the main dining room. But so it's like it's like an intro level cooks, but then they're on display.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. It's still a great restaurant.
Mhm.
It still holds up. Every time I walk by, I'm like, I want to eat here. It's a
Yeah.
great restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went to work there.
I went to work there and but it didn't sit right with me.
Mm,
It would have been a great restaurant, I think, for me to work at when I was like 22 or 23, but
mm.
it didn't, for as beautiful as the restaurant is, I was looking at the work that I'm doing and the food that I was making, and a lot of it was like the volume. And I said to myself, and no disrespect to Gramercy Tavern, I think they're doing a great job and I have lots of friends who worked there for a long time, but I didn't, at this point in my life, I did not like the trade-off of like the amount that I'm working and the level of the food that coming out on the other side. And like, I don't want to spend my time making something um, that I'm not
Involved in?
100% behind.
Right.
And also I just think that it was flawed because I was trying to work in restaurants and it wasn't right for me and nothing probably would have worked then. And so I quit and I did like some catering to pay bills for a second and that really sucked. And then I dropped everything and I went to Mexico for 4 months and that was perfect.
But yeah, catering does really suck. But I think there's a moment for chefs where I mean, there's some chefs who will always be on the line, but there's another side too, which is that eventually people who want to do their own thing have to strike out and do their own thing. And when you said you were depressed, I wonder if that has a lot to do with it, because being told what to do in a restaurant isn't the same as creating your own dishes.
Right. Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, like it's a mixed bag because like it's a blessing and a curse. I think
Right.
that like some ways in some ways you know, it's amazing to have lessons and to be taught by people who are much better than you. And so for me to like be impatient and say like I want to do it by myself and I need to learn, I'm shortchanging myself um, by not getting, when I was younger, I really liked playing piano and I had piano lessons and I hated it. And like I really hated practicing what I was told to practice and I liked playing whatever I wanted to play. But now that I'm a very old man, I it would be such a luxury to have piano lessons. So it's just like where does it come at the point in your life? But I mean I look back on it and I feel and even like I feel part of me feels like a hack in the restaurant world, right? Because like I don't have like this, I've worked in restaurants and I've done real work at real places. But I don't have this long list of places that I spent, Gramercy Tavern, like I wouldn't even like put that on my resume, right? I spent 3 months there. That doesn't count.
Well, sometimes it's enough though,
Right.
observational stages are, I've done tons of observational stages. I've worked in restaurants that I thought I was going to work in for 5 years for 3 months. And I said, I get this. I understand what's going on here.
Right.
I don't need to work here much longer,
Yeah.
right? Like I understand the market. I understand this guy's cooking. It's brilliant. I've soaked it all in, but anything more than the time that I'm here is charity,
Mm.
because I get paid nothing.
Right.
So fuck it.
David, did you have a time that you want to start striking out on your own, or did you just get a chef job and it kind of was forced on you?
I don't know. That's a good question. I thought I was kind of always lucky and in the right place at the right time. And my training was extensive in my young youth, right? So My mom says like I might have blossomed too early, and I do tend to agree with that. I would tend to agree that a lot of the, chefs right now, and this isn't a slight on the city, but you know,
Are pushed too quickly into
there is
restaurant?
such a thing as blossoming way too early. Like there's guys that go to cooking school, work at one, or don't go to cooking school, work at one restaurant, and 12 months later, they're opening a restaurant in Little Italy with their bros, you know, and the food is passably good, but I see things and I'm like, oh my God, this is a disaster. Oh God, my God, you can't put that with that, like, oh my God, but the general public is not educated enough to know that lamb chops covered with truffles is sucks. It's like a bad idea, right? But they still get like, hundreds of likes on Instagram because the people don't know, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of
Part of what
maybe.
I understand what you're saying, but part of what you're saying like resonate it like reminds me of what I think like it sounds a little bit like what I did, even though it's with I don't think I'm putting like truffles on lamb chops and making like dumb Instagram food. But I do feel like there's like an impatient aspect of like, okay, I did my time. I don't know if it's enough, but I need to be on my own now. And that could be impatient. And so like I'm not the 23-year-old like, hedge fund backed restaurant that opened up like after like a 12.
100%. Like to answer then what Sammy said leads me to when I was done working with Rosalie, right? I'd done Rosalie, I'd open time supper club with them. I'd been at Globe, and I'd been there for years. Like, it's almost a pre-Instagram career of 15 years that I had before Joe Beef, which was another basically 12 or 13 years, right? When I left Rosalie, I was like, that's it.
You're not working for anybody.
No, never working for anybody unless they're better at my job than me.
Right.
And I never met like, at that time I was like, they're shit at designing restaurants, they're shit at wine, they like penne. I'm like, I'm never working for anybody that I don't have admiration and respect for. And then that was basically Fred.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought Fred was a great cook. I wanted to work with him, right?
But there's also we can't forget that there's a cooking can be steak frit or cooking can be extremely creative. So if
Hmm.
you're a creative person, you eventually don't want to just be copying somebody else's plates. You do
But you
want
can
to
always
create
do
your own
that though.
thing,
You can like I like making burgers and I like making steak frit.
but you want to do it in your way.
Yeah, but sometimes that way is just like
The same.
the pan that you're using and
Yeah.
like the bread that you bought or this like weird mix of pear and gorgonzola cheese that you're never going to tell anybody about, but that makes like the fries taste better. I don't know, like the creativity somehow is, I don't know.
Overrated? Is it overrated?
Well, there's no place for it, so really, like I see creative food and I see guys that are really good at stuffing everything. Right? Everything is stuffed, everything is rolled, everything is a loin with a thing in it, everything is like wrapped in caul fat, everything is cooked in immersion chicken. I see guys that are just like technically brilliant and what would some people would say creative. But I don't know, for my idea of food was always like
Putting a slice of tomato on the steak?
respect the classics. No, it just makes sense. It's delicious. Is it delicious or is it not delicious? If it's not delicious, then it's like for me, it's not for me,
If it's
right?
not delicious, it's not anything that is delicious is like so you can chase some I want to make something interesting, a lot of people are thinking. And like but delicious is it by definition interesting. It means your mouth is interested. And so
Yeah.
if you're making delicious food, it is interesting. If you're making quote unquote, if you're chasing interesting and it's not delicious, there's nothing interesting about that.
A waste of time. If only more young chefs knew that.
So let's fast forward a little bit. How did you end up in Rockland?
Wait, let's rewind a little bit.
Okay, perfect.
Um,
Because I only say that because
Nice
of my
try.
fascination with
it's
Maine, right?
actually maybe it's not rewind because I'm already in Rockland, but I have a question for you.
Right.
And I was like, I was I guess I didn't really know much about Joe Beef. It probably was in existence for quite a while before I was even aware of it. Which is nothing about you. It's more about me, and like I'm not aware of things.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I remember, I think I was about 30, and I was visiting a friend, and your cookbook was on his like coffee table. And I think I had like heard of it or something, and I thumbed through it, but then I was like, holy shit. And like I read every word like 17 times. And I laughed and I cried, and it was like, this is it. This is the Bible. Like this is not only is this great food, but it's a different kind of greatness than I've ever seen before. It is precise in the ways that it has to be precise. And I remember, for example, a picture of like bone marrow with like really beautiful brunoise of vegetables and broth, and like the
Yeah, it's a
simplicity
good
of
dish.
that and the
Yeah.
beauty of it. And it's like, okay, they have chops, and it's like really well thought out, but it's a humble dish too. And then there's like humor that I had never seen in any of the restaurants that I had ever worked before. And not only was that, it wasn't like a different thing. It wasn't like we have this food and then there's humor too, but the humor actually made the food better, or dishes devised on humor of like, hey, this dish is starting from a pun, or this dish is starting from our observation that people are trying to outdo themselves, like outdo each other in the dumbest ways, and we're gonna poke fun at that, and we're gonna serve oysters on an old broken radio. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like that is not that's fucking gold. And
Well,
just
thank you.
so eye-opening. And it's like I have to go there. I have to go to that place. And so I went and I ate at Joe Beef.
Was it your first time in Montreal?
No, actually, I went because I went to I went to a summer camp in
Oh,
Vermont as a kid, and then was a counselor there. And for whatever reason, I guess some things catch on with French Canadians. Like, for example, they all swarm to Old Orchard Beach. And this particular summer camp, maybe because like at some point one kid had gone from like Quebec and Montreal and told their friends, and basically like 40% of the camp was French Canadian. In fact, I remember being a counselor one year in my cabin of like 12-year-old boys. They all six of them were French speakers, and there's this little bastard named Louis, who got them all to like gang up on me, but he was really cute too. But like I could speak like pretty poor French, but it was much more difficult with like the, what do you call it, joual, like the French Canadian
Yeah.
accent. And so I could barely understand a thing that they could say, and they were really ganging up on me. But it was anyway. So I had lots of friends, like the other fellow like CITs, and we would like take a trip up to Montreal or Quebec on our days off, and like we could visit a bar, like sneak into bars, and it's like, oh, this is a good entry to adulthood. And so yeah, I already had like a fun relationship with but I
with
didn't at the
Montreal.
time. I thought like, we ate a lot of shish taouk on like St. Catherine, and
Yep.
how's my pronunciation?
That's very good.
Yeah, excellent.
And so I didn't know, like, I didn't realize there was like a food scene too.
Mm.
But so then I went up. I went up. I guess it was probably what year was this? It would have been like 2012. I went and made a pilgrimage to Montreal specifically to eat at Joe Beef with like a friend of mine who I had cooked with in New York, who had gone to college in he had gone to what's the good college in Montreal?
McGill?
McGill. He had gone to McGill.
McGill, yeah.
He's from New York, but he had gone to McGill. So we went and ate at Joe Beef. And so that, I don't know, what year
It
did
was
you
it was
open?
underwhelming, eh? It was underwhelming the meal?
No, it wasn't. It was I loved it.
Oh, good.
I did love it. I had a blast.
Was David there?
I have
Do
no
you
idea.
remember?
We didn't know anybody. I didn't talk to anybody. We just went in as like normal people and we had a meal and that's it. But then I went back in I guess like probably 2017 or 2018 and this time I had already been to Joe Beef and my friend, the same friend was like, "Oh, you should try um the restaurant like Liverpool House is like a little more casual." And
Yeah.
so I ate there and had an absolutely amazing time. And I
Yeah.
remember
Ari was firing that was working then, yeah?
yep, I remember everything about it. Pablo was like maybe a back server or something, but
Yeah.
and our server was Marius.
Yeah.
And initially he was like sort of standoffish, and we thought like he's kind of a jerk. And like Pablo was really fun, and he like stepped in and was like nice. And then I saw Ari like popping out of the kitchen and like um and sort of just being a goofball, but also being serious. And I was like, "Ooh, I think I would like working with that guy." And
Yeah.
that was my first impressions, but just had a magical night. And then walked outside and just strolling down and just sort of like soaking in the magic of the block that you reigned over. Um, and walked in front of Joe Beef, and there you were in the doorway, like smoking a cigarette or something, and struck up conversation with you and you were like, "Oh, like why don't you come back to the terrace and have a drink?" And
I remember, yeah, we had a bottle of wine together.
we had a bottle of wine.
I
In
might have
fact,
ranted.
you had a
I
bottle
might have
of
been ranting.
you had a bottle of sparkling water, and I had a
Oh,
bottle of wine,
really?
and I was really coveting your bottle of sparkling water. Um,
That's funny.
but we talked for like 2 hours and you showed me your smoker and we talked about Sammy's and then at that point after that point and we talked about all kinds of things and it was a mat for me it sounds like it was a more meaningful night for me than it was for you it
No,
was a
no, I remember that night fondly because I
it,
was already like, just my fascin Joe Beef and even that book that you like, and even let's say my career and Fred's career at that time was propelled mostly by like we changed the way we cooked and thought about food completely. Like Fred and I were working like in for Nicolas Jongleur, and like we're doing tasting menus and very, very specific French
French food.
bourgeois tasting menu cooking. And I think back in those days, Sam Hayward had made the cover of Saveur magazine
uh-huh
in Maine. And I liked Saveur magazine very much. It was one of my favorites. And but that Sam Hayward issue, I was just like opening it, and I was like, "What the fuck is this kitchen? Like, what? This is like homemade equipment. It's like a bicycle wheel rotisserie with rabbits on it over
right
live charcoal." Then like all this like weird food that on earthenware plates and on wooden boards and just something completely out of left field to what was going on in North America, even in France. I was like, the room was beautiful right away. Like basically 10 days later, I was getting in the car and driving there.
hmm
And, the bar, the old man bartender, the painting behind the bar, the leather chairs, the walk-in fridge, the cedar paneled walk-in fridge behind the hostess station, the window that looked into the dish pit from outside. Uh, and then this wild open kitchen, which was basically, there wasn't a gram of stainless steel to it. It was all like bricks and wood and pits and ovens, and they weren't using, it was a pizza oven, but there was no pizza going on. It was just like mussels and clams and striped bass coming out of there, and rotisserie rabbits with lard on them, and I was just blown away. It's like I got a bunch of chopped rabbit on my plate with a soft apple, and I was like, the greatest thing
Heaven.
I've ever had. Wine list was bright. The serving staff was like great. And I started to, venerate. Can you say that? Venerate in English?
Absolutely.
I started to
Absolutely.
venerate Sam Hayward. I was like this person, this old man, even back then. I'm sure he's still around. Supposedly, I hear. I
He
don't
is.
ask,
He's around. Yep.
but I had such this like admiration for him that I didn't want to meet him. Because the story I'd made myself believe about him was better. So
Right.
and that Fred was there soon after, I believe. I sent a few cooks there, and it was for us. It was like, yeah, that's it. Like, we're not going to do that because that's what he's doing is Maine, right? He permitted me to be able to look at Montreal in a way that he looked at Maine, right? It was about like a philosophical approach, right? Like the way he saw that restaurant and the seaport town he was in and the food he was doing. I was like, this is exactly what this should be, and it should be here, right? I didn't want to go home and do that, but I was like, I started, I sat across before we opened. Like, no, that we'd been there before. We opened Joe Beef, and when we sat on the curb across the street when it was still like the sandwich place that we bought, you know, we're like, this restaurant should have oysters because it did. These restaurants did have oysters in the past because of how shipping worked and the Grand Trunk Railway and blah blah blah, and and this restaurant should have chops because we're right next to the Atwater Market, and this restaurant should have, and it was because I was looking at the empty building that was to be Joe Beef with Sam Hayward glasses on, because as opposed to like, yeah, we're going to put white tablecloths, we're going to do 30, we're going to do 27 courses, because it could have easily been
And
that,
that's what it was at the time.
right? Because everyone was that, right? And I was like, nope, no, we're going to do giant pork chops and we're going to put a jar of applesauce on the table, you know? Anyway, I don't know why I went
Just
off.
the no tablecloths was a big deal back then. Just that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've
But you
always like,
didn't.
But you
But you
brought
didn't.
yourself into it too, David. You're being a little humble there. You brought a lot of yourself in it too.
But you
yeah, but
didn't
it was,
know. You didn't know. I don't. I guess my question for you that I didn't get to ask yet is, I don't think you knew anything about me or that I was from Maine, and so your obsession with Maine has nothing to do with the fact that you just invited some weird half-drunk stranger into your backyard to talk for 3 hours.
He did that a lot.
Like
no, I
nobody
did
does
that a lot.
that.
I thought it was part of hospitality. Fred was very good at that as well. And so was like Meredith worked there back then. Vanya's very good at, like, it's been proven to be very good now. She's the best at what she does. Uh, you know, very good at taking the extra time because
I didn't even eat at
it's
your
not,
restaurant. I'm a
yeah, but
idiot walking down the street. I guess you knew I ate at Liverpool House.
yeah, I knew everything. Like I
Yeah,
watched everything. Like, people don't know how,
they get the
Oh, I said
cameras.
people think people think I'm clueless, but I know every person and every
You
seat.
saw me put the gum under the bar.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing nobody ever talks about, eh? That if you flip all the tables around in a
They're
restaurant
full of gum.
every week, no, but every week you could harvest a pound of
Oh my
gum.
God.
That's how much tables. And sometimes you found really giant snots under there too.
Ah,
You know, I've been to like two Michelin star restaurants and ran my hand under the table
no.
and found gum and
No.
yeah.
But that was crazy, and that was meaningful to me. And it was like, this is an extraordinary person, and I've never experienced this before. And then, like we didn't, we spent like 2 hours with each other, and so that's a meaningful interaction. But then you like started paying attention to my restaurant like remotely, and I would post a menu, and you would read it thoroughly, like you would actually read it and you would have insightful comments all via the interweb, and but you were like a person who has like a platform, and that you're like going out of your way and genuinely seeming to appreciate what I did. Uh, like I didn't. It was like uh, it
No, but
was
I was interested. You did like I was like, what's that? Like, the brown bread and the can. I
right.
was like, what? I don't know anything about that. And then you posted. I remember a picture of an alewife trap
Yep.
and a little bit of history to the fishing of alewives, how it was for widows, and it was the widows allowed to use the trap or something or like that. And I was like, I
Yep.
don't know anything about that. So, when I'm interested and I grew up what you guys, I guess, in Maine have. I feel like you guys in Maine have a little bit of disdain for all things south of Portland.
Yep.
I've been
Oh no,
told that.
I mean, Portland is part of the disdain, actually.
Right. Wow. But, I've been told like, oh yeah, I love Algonquin and Wells Beach. People go, fuck you. That's not Maine. That's
Right.
Massachusetts,
Exactly.
And, but I grew up there, right? So I have this fondness for it. And, you know, and I've spent a bit of time in Portland as well. That food change has changed a lot over the last 10 years. I liked it a little bit more, 15 years ago.
No question.
And, but yeah, now I guess my future explorations into Maine is going to have to be from Rockland north. Is actually I've been reading a lot about some of those interesting bays, and I'd like
Hmm.
to go visit Damariscotta Oyster Farm, and I'd actually like to go underwater to see
It's
if
it's Damerscotta.
Damariscotta,
No, no, just forget the Damerscotta. Four syllables. Damerscotta.
Damariscotta.
Devastating.
There you go.
So how did you end up in Maine from New York?
When
What was the
I grew up in Durham, New Hampshire, so that's like pretty close.
right?
Actually, I was closer to Old Orchard Beach and like had spent more time there as a child. Because I'm like New Hampshire has 13 miles of coastline, so it's like I'm really
Hmm.
close to Kittery. Like that was basically where I grew up, like in that neck of the woods. And so New York, I went to most exciting place on the planet. Like you're absolutely insane if you don't live here, was my idea. And then I ran a small restaurant in the Adirondacks for one summer. That's the next time I left New York after England. And I really, really liked that experience of
It
cooking.
is a bit of a gourmet wasteland, the Adirondacks. There's not a lot going on there. I
No,
mean,
but I really liked the setting. I liked being out of the city and in the woods, and I forgot how
mm,
much I liked that. I had a budding um, what's the word? Passion or obsession with like I was learning how to look for mushrooms, and
mm,
I grabbed onto it with a fervent obsession, and that area was rich in them, so that was like fertile ground for me. Um, and I just saw like, okay, I don't have the Union Square Farmers Market, and I don't have Callustians, and I don't have all these resources where I can get like very good versions of basically everything in the entire world at my fingertips. And we have a much smaller basket of ingredients out here in the woods, but every single one of them is more meaningful and it's better quality. And I would
mm,
much rather have a smaller basket of ingredients of stuff that has a meaning than things that
mhm,
are shipped into the marketplace of New York City.
right.
And I had met a friend who was a professional forager in the mid coast of Maine. And one of the things that he was selling to, I hadn't, you moved out of New York yet, but one of the things he was selling was oak leaves for decorations in New York City. And I was like, how fucked is this? Like, New York is such a concrete jungle that you have to get oak leaves shipped in to decorate your dining room. I can't be
Mm,
here anymore. And it just like completely flipped on its head of from this is the most exciting place in the world to this is like the dirtiest place in the world. It's so noisy. I don't have any space. And from a food perspective, nothing has any rhyme or reason. Like there is no New York, there's no ingredients that are special to New York. There's no, I mean, there's some techniques that came there. There's like pastrami's cool and pizza's cool, and there's a shit ton of talent here. but there's nothing that you can. And I would amend this, but at the time thinking like there's nothing that is inherently special about New York that can only be done in New York because it's in New York. And
I
I,
was recently complaining, not to cut off your rant, but I was just saying like, this is cool. I'm in New York, but I bet like, if you wanted to eat rabbit right now, it's impossible,
yep,
right? I was like, New York is cool, but none of the foods I want are here. And
right.
people are like, that's insane. I like, no, I like andouillette. There's none of that here. I like rabbit. There's none of that here.
Yeah.
I like, like there's a lot of, foods here that,
New York too, for a long time, all the top chefs were from France. They weren't from New York, you know?
Sure.
sorry to cut you off.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
no worries. So, I mean, it's true. It's just a matter of taste. Like what seemed like the best place in the world, it's subjective, and now all of a sudden, it's the worst place in the world. And like I knew, I just had to leave. So I moved out of my apartment. I made myself mobile. I got a car. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to leave New York. And there was something that felt like I had some pull to New England. Like this seems nice. I knew, like for example, where I grew up. Like I would never want to go back there. That doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like. Also, I'm trying to be realistic. Of there has to be a dining culture. Like where my place in the Adirondacks, where I loved cooking. It wasn't like that seemed like a great place to open a restaurant. I don't think I would have done something that would have been well received. But I had been going to the mid coast with my forager buddy and saw like, hey, there's actually like they're sustaining like a good number of restaurants here. And this basket of ingredients is really quite special. And that's exciting. And it's close enough to home and it feels familiar and it feels like where I grew up and it feels like, my summer camp in Vermont. Um, and it has the mushrooms and it's on the ocean and it can fish for mackerel and also it can sustain restaurants. So I think like maybe that's the spot. And so I was sort of looking for jobs and uh, I wound up doing something I thought I would never do. I took a 7 week job private cooking
Hmm.
on an island off the coast. And I was like, well, private chefing, that would be horrible. And I lucked out, and the family that I cooked for was really nice. And I had a lovely time. And that got me up here. And while I was here, somebody who I had previously met, who I knew had been opening a restaurant, and she had previously talked to me about trying to run it, but the way that she described it and the time that she described it wasn't right and didn't conduce me to leave New York to run her restaurant. But the opening was sort of botched, and she and the chef parted ways, and she wanted a new chef, and she was like feeling me out, and it was like 2 weeks into my 7 week commitment, and she's like, "Come run the restaurant." I was like, "No, I'm gonna finish my commitment, but we'll talk after." So we stayed in touch, and as soon as the private cooking thing ended, I went and checked out this other restaurant and we decided like, okay, this is a good fit. So basically I came up with like a backpack of 7 weeks worth of stuff and one job led to another job and I wound up running this restaurant for 2.5 years that I won't name because yeah, I don't feel like it. And she still has a brand and I don't want to support it. Is oops, I just said that out loud. And
I could put two and two together.
and when that restaurant exploded or imploded or whatever it was, and this was the second time because actually my last thing in New York is I helped open this pretty cool, um, I think way ahead of its time, Mexican restaurant called Gran Electrica, and we did
Oh, wow.
really really fantastic work there. And the owners wanted to serve like chips and guac and tacos, and I was like, "There's more to Mexican food than this." And it was like this crazy uphill battle to make them realize that, even though they were sitting on
Well,
gold and they didn't know that.
enchiladas.
Um, yeah, right. Ha ha ha. But also like, yeah,
Yeah.
the deep cuts of Mexican food, which is now like getting the acclaim that it deserves of it. This is a real
Absolutely.
cuisine. Um,
Yes.
And they wound up firing me because I was a pain in the ass and like didn't just want to make guacamole, even though I had made that abundantly clear before I took the job. So I had like put a lot of work into like building something beautiful, and it got ripped away from me. And then that happened again at the restaurant that I'm not naming because she has a brand that I don't want to support. And then I said, like, I have to open my own thing. I can't like work and do this work and have it torn away from me. Like, that's not my decision, or like fight against an owner. And it's just like such a waste of time. So I started looking at spaces, and I had no money, and I also had no balls. And I still have no balls.
No
And
money.
and um and so of all the spaces I looked at, like that would have required like maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment. When I looked at the space that Sammy's is now in, which was formerly the Sunfire Grill, a Mexican restaurant, and they wanted to sell it to me, and it was like there was a microwave and like a home stove and it was like, you're selling me what? Like, no way am I going to give you like $40,000 for a microwave and some ugly plates. Um, and because they also wanted to sell me like the name and the menu, and like it's like I'm not looking for that. I'll take the space, and like we can haggle on a fair price on the microwave because I love a microwave. Um, and um, and so I said no to that and kept looking, and I almost was going to like give up on that and work for another restaurant. Um, and I was starting to help open this restaurant with sort of a psychopath, and I probably shouldn't say that out loud either. And that fell through at the 11th hour. So I was going into the summer of 2016, and Maine's a highly seasonal place, like without a job, because I thought I was going to open this restaurant, and I don't have a job. And I like thought back to all the places I had looked at, and like, hey, that dumpy Mexican restaurant with the microwave. They're asking for too much money. But like of all the places I looked at, I can actually see a path forward from that one. That's feasible. I might not have a long run there, but I could probably make this happen, and I could just do this for one season. I'm going to open for one summer, and it won't be that much money. Um, and at the very least, I'm gonna scratch this motherfucking itch that like I need to open a restaurant, and I'll put that away, and then maybe I can go be an architect or something. Um, or who knows what. But like that'll be worth it. It's like the risk is feasible. And so we bartered, and I think I wound up like I signed the lease, and I think I spent like $6,500 to get mostly a lot of stuff that I didn't want, but it was back and forth, and their ego, I realized their ego was in it, and like I had to give them enough money to feel like it was worthwhile. And then also there was some wiggle room because like, hey, at least I don't have to go like shopping for tables and stuff. And I opened in 13 days. So they were there until the end of May 2016. I signed the lease June 1st. And as soon as I got my liquor license approved, June 12th, I was open the next day, June 13th. I had put a little coat of paint on, um, and people didn't even, there's no PR, no nothing. People didn't even realize that it wasn't Sunfire Grill anymore, and they came in looking for burritos. And that's how Sammy's opened.
There's no burritos on the menu, I hope.
There's
Maybe.
there's no burritos on the menu, though it took like we haven't had people haven't looked for burritos in a while, but it probably took about 6 years before the last person asked for burrito.
Well, wow,
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
wow, wow, wow. So how long have you been open? 6 years?
Now this was my 10th summer.
10th
Yeah,
summer.
so
Was it a hit
nine
from the
years.
beginning? Were you full from the
No,
beginning?
not at all. In fact, we had our first completely full night, meaning like there was no open table in terms of reservations, um, 2 weeks maybe before the New York Times thing. So it took 9 years to have our first full night.
How many seats do you have? How many
We
seats?
have it depends on the configuration, but maybe like 40. So
And
we
now
were
with the
We were
And now
busy.
with the New York Times?
I'm not saying we weren't busy. We were busy, but to have like a
Right.
completely sold out house, like not one seat left, it took 9 years.
And now are people calling? I mean, has that had an effect, that article?
Yeah, it's had a real effect. Uh, it's had a real
Well, it's
effect.
shameful that more food writers don't try to actually drive up and down that coast and write a little bit more.
You said it,
Uh,
not me.
yeah, it's shameful. You know, I'll tell you a funny parallel story. Um, and Leslie can probably attest to what I'm about to say. But um, you know, when we'd opened Joe Beef, um, getting the word about a Canadian restaurant into, let's say, the American press was impossible. Gourmet magazine would come to Quebec once every 3 years and write like either a Thanksgiving story or a Christmas in Quebec City story, editorial pieces of which they'd name a few restaurants. Food and Wine magazine, it's like the world ended at the border, right? It was like there was nothing after the USA in
I'd
Canada.
say Food and Wine had ended at New York City.
Yeah, Food and Wine wouldn't write, Saveur wouldn't come up. Um, New York Times certainly wouldn't. You know, we were just existing without any mention, not even just for me, it's like for anybody in Canada was just not part and still isn't part of James Beard Awards and you know, and then any American magazine press when magazines were actually really hot, right? It took David Chang to basically get on a cheap flight because he was suffering from what was he?
Jingles or something.
Shingles. Yeah, Dave was suffering from shingles. Just got out of town. I think it was an Air Canada flight, the cheapest flight you could get out of LaGuardia.
Hmm.
And in the En route magazine that comes, you know, with your seat, it said like we were a good restaurant,
Yeah.
right? And I think David came straight to Joe Beef, and I remember I was shucking oysters, and Fred was like doing garde manger or something like that. And like I look at Fred, Fred looks at me, and I'm like, even David wasn't that famous back then, but he was starting to get like press, you know, and
He was famous enough to give himself the shingles over some press.
correct, right? But Momofuku was like becoming to starting to be a really big deal,
Yeah.
and then David basically posted like what the fuck, yeah. Back then he said my two favorite restaurants in the world are Joe Beef and Noma, and nobody had heard of Noma and nobody had heard of Joe Beef, right? It was like basically the day after David's post, right?
Yeah.
Noma went on to be whatever Noma is, and but the day after David Chang's post was like the New York Times were interested in chatting on the phone.
Right.
You know, Food and Wine magazine was like, maybe we'll do an editorial piece on you guys.
Yeah.
Saveur magazine, like, we want to do an editorial piece, which then is funny because Food and Wine did an editorial piece on Joe Beef and with me and Fred, and then they folded. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Then Gourmet Magazine did an editorial piece. It's a great article. The train, their last train to the north or whatever. Gourmet Magazine did an editorial piece on Joe Beef, folded. Saveur did an editorial piece on Joe Beef, folded.
You're a
So we have
curse.
the kiss. We have the kiss of death for you know, magazine publications.
Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, you're
Because
making him feel good about his mention. Yeah.
no. Thank you for helping to fold these toxic magazines.
But actually, the one bad thing good bad thing that happened is that at one point Montreal was featured as a city to visit in Gourmet magazine, but the headline was something like the best place to eat on a budget, you know? So
Oh,
Montreal
God.
was really the place to always eat if you didn't want
you
to
don't want to
spend a
go to
lot of money.
France.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
you
mean,
don't want to
that's-
spend, go to Montreal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a problem. But you know, I think that New York was taking up a lot of attention at that time, and Europe. And
Right.
even California wasn't getting probably the press they deserved. So everything was really New York centric there for a long time.
Hmm.
But 9 years to wait to, like,
Think
you
if
know.
you're an American city that's not getting any attention. What about American cities that were getting no attention? You know, it's like
Sammy was a good story to write about, like, you know, 6 years ago. That's the thing. Like, you know, journalists, open your eyes. It was this what we're even talking about on this podcast was a good story to write
Right.
7 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just fucked.
The journalists are lazy. They don't get out enough. The new generation of journalists is lazy.
Also, it took a little bit of time, I think, to wrap, when you walk into Sammy's restaurant, it is a little bit of, it's not a little bit, it's very much an anti-restaurant. Like
Okay.
it still looks like it cost them, $6,500 to build and was open in 13 days.
Maybe I overpaid.
Do you have a professional range yet?
No, it's we so there is we don't have there's no gas in Rockland, right? So if you want gas, you have a exterior propane
Propane
tank,
tank?
and we don't have 1 square inch of outside space. So propane is a niche, and it's a super shitty old building, and the electrical service into the building is bad, and I don't own the building, and so I'm not going to pay to update it. So the only thing that the building can handle is like a home range. And so that was there, and I said like that's fine. I'm going to use this thing. So it really is not a restaurant. And the history of the restaurant is that these people who owned the Mexican restaurant before that, they had a food truck. And it was really good, I guess, successful enough that they decided to do a brick and mortar. But when they did the brick and mortar, they essentially opened a food truck with a dining room attached to it. And it was this narrow little takeout counter with a food truck kitchen and a dining room attached to it. But then that did well enough that when the bookstore next door closed, they took that over and took the wall down. So then they have a food truck kitchen with a really big dining room attached to it. And so that's where I went in. Essentially, Sammy's Deluxe is a food truck kitchen. We have a home stove, and it's not made for professional use. And they break every like 6 to 8 weeks, and I've learned to be a little bit of a stove mechanic and fix it as much as we can. And then I go on to Facebook Marketplace and get a new used GE Adora glass top range or like Maytag. I don't want to say the brands too much because I've really thought that they should sponsor me because I'm like
They
showing
should.
like what could happen on these stoves, and they've never decided to do it. So I'm really not brand loyal. Like I would go with it, whatever brand wanted to sponsor, so I don't have to keep like replacing these stoves on my own. But yeah, so we're using a dumb home range that usually like 3 out of the 4 burners work on, and that's what we got.
So tell us a bit about your restaurant for people who haven't been. So are you open lunch and dinner? How many days a week?
We're
How many
open
are you in the kitchen?
dinner only Wednesday through Saturday.
Are you alone in the kitchen?
No, so it's me plus two when things are going well, or me plus one.
Okay, and
When
you close in the
the night
winter?
that David came in. No, we're open year round.
Great.
Which is that was like a really I basically made that decision for 2 reasons. That might not be that smart, but one is like I don't like it. It doesn't seem nice to me as a local when restaurants close in the winter. It's like we're not really a restaurant for locals. And also like I don't want to rebuild my team every spring. Like I want to
Hmm.
keep good people employed and like work with them. And probably also if I closed in the winter at some point, I would have the good sense to say like I don't want to reopen at all. Like there's a lot of momentum.
Hmm.
Like it requires me to like numb my brain into submission to keep doing the restaurant. So if I took enough time off to think, I might like not reopen at all. So the momentum is important for me as well.
But are you happy now? Are you happy now with your restaurant?
I mean, I'm not a person who, no, I'm just kidding. There, like, ha, I am happy. I have the curse of being a thoughtful person. Um, and, um, and so I can always see like the bright sides and I can always like complain. I'm certainly not glass half empty, but everything's generally always bittersweet for me. Um, and so I'm happy in a lot of ways, and I'm having a good time in a lot of ways. I definitely question, especially the fact that I don't own the building. I'm like upset that I can't tinker it with it in some ways, and like the space is like frustrating. But it's also been like a charming space, and Rockland has been like a good home to operate in. So it depends which lens I want to look at things through.
So, can I ask you one question out of curiosity? What is Rockland though? Is it a fishing port? What goes on there?
So
What's the main?
Rockland's pretty cool because the rest of the mid coast is like very pretty and picture
Yeah,
perfect, and even some places are like sort of Disneyfied.
sure. I
And
noticed Rockland is not beautiful, and no
exactly.
disrespect to the people of Rockland, but I was staying at the hotel that I was staying at, and I was like, "This view sucks. This place fucking like they destroyed the waterfront here or
Well, it's
something."
a Rockland's historically a working waterfront
Yeah,
where it's not for not for yachters, yachts or whatever the right term is. It's been
yachtsman.
Yachtsman.
it's been industrial, so it's a active fishing port, and it has been an active fishing port. There were sardine canneries there historically. There's seaweed processing, and so there's, I think, an industrial beauty to it. Also, if you walk through town, there are like really pretty old brick buildings, and when the light hits
Sure.
it in right
Yes.
ways, that has its own kind of beauty. But so it was also like historically kind of rough, and it's kind of funny because it's not that big. But Sammy's is not. Sammy's is on the street called Main Street, but I'm not in the heart of Main Street. I'm like a block and a half north of Main Street, and I might as well be in like the shitty like outer neighborhood that's like dangerous. Like there's no you have to like the street the quality of the sidewalk bricks stop a block and a half lower, and the street lamps stop a block and a half lower, and there's no Christmas lights, and walk up to Sammy's if you dare. And
You're
there's
like
like
the opposite of
vacant buildings.
Gramercy Tavern.
Yeah, there's vacant buildings there. And so people, especially in the early days, like
Crackheads.
didn't even know the restaurant existed, right? Because I'm this like brick building. And like when you said like I'm almost an anti-restaurant, part of that's by design. Like I said, like I don't want to have a logo and I don't want to have a font. I'm just like there's a sign on the wall that says like Sammy's Deluxe Restaurant. Like we're here's a restaurant. Um, and like there's no big neon sign and nothing flashing by, and like you have to be intentional to get here. And I sort of thought it's like, oh, like this is like in the best case scenario, if you stumble onto this thing, how magical is that? Um,
There's a smell to your restaurant uh, that's probably 50% old building, but also 50% my grandmother's house.
mhm.
And it's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing. I noticed when I walked into the restaurant, I go, "What is this? Oh, Mammy." Like I went right back to my grandma.
It was
This is
probably
my
some old lady at the table sitting next to you.
Well, maybe we should wrap up there. The smell of the old lady. That was great. I'm driving to Rockland immediately just to come taste your food. But you do have an Instagram page. You've refused all the logos and everything, but you have an Instagram page.
Yeah, that I did that like maybe 4 years in or something. I was it was just me,
It's fun.
and then I
It's fun.
What,
switched
what,
it to the restaurant.
what else do you like in Rockland? Where do you eat in Rockland?
So
If
I
someone
don't,
was coming to Rockland, let's say,
we're all open on the same days.
yeah.
So I really don't eat out at all, and kind of I don't go to Rockland on my weekends. Um,
Do you live in Rockland?
I live in Searsmont, so I live 30 minutes north of Rockland, like in the woods, on a little
Oh,
pond.
nice,
Uh,
nice.
so I only go into the big city for commerce.
Yeah, that's very well said.
Wow, should we wrap up?
Yeah.
That
Hey,
was a lot of fun. I love your whole life, your everything, your discoveries. That was great. That was great.
I want to
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Sammy, for doing this with us.
That was great.
That was really good.
Great
Thank
to
you
meet
so
you.
much.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me. And like I, again, heartfelt. Like I can't believe that you invited me to your terrace, and here we are talking, and like you're a fucking hero. And like
No, no, no.
no,
I
yes,
find it
yes,
kind
yes.
of,
You
I
have
like it.
You are.
Yeah,
You are
were it
good.
not
I
for
identify kindred spirits easily in the
my
street.
man, the way that you described Sam Hayward, like were it not for me picking up the Joe Beef book and giving me not only giving me permission that like up until that point the fine food that I had been cooking and the restaurants I had been working in were so uptight and straight and not for me. They were different kinds of people. And that not only is there permission to have poke fun at it and have a sense of humor and like what's allowed in these places, but also it actually improves it.
Yeah, well, food, kicking the kid, and we're back right now. I mean, we're in a dangerous spot again. I'll just say that we're in a dangerous spot again in dining with, young chefs aspiring to be on lists again. I see like, we're on lists, we're amazing.
But dining,
and then the
even
Michelin
that
guy
word,
comes in.
That word's offensive. I don't want dining. I want to eat food. I want to eat dinner.
Yes. We're in a slippery place right now because that fucking elitist luxury double-headed snake has reared its head again and is pushing us into this fucking dumb direction again.
And I'm a snake killer.
And I'm gonna have to... Eh?
I got a bat, and I kill snakes.
I love you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, too.
Be good. Thank you, Sammy.
So thanks everybody for listening to this week's episode. If you have any questions or comments, you can always reach us at saltlakepodcast@gmail.com. We also really like getting ratings, so feel free to give us a multi-starred rating on any of the social media platforms and the podcast platforms. And we just want to let you know that we're looking for our first sponsors. So if you're a passionate food lover who's been enjoying these podcasts that we've been doing, think of joining us, becoming a sponsor. We'd really appreciate it. And who knows, we might even show up and do a show at your store one day. Take care.
Think Bait. TNKR Media. Good talk.